Hello, everybody, and welcome to another brand new episode of Hey Man, It's Okay. You got me, one of your hosts, Sky Bridges, and this is my other amazing host, Ryan Heapy.
Hey guys, how we doing today? How you doing, Sky?
Doing good. Good to see you.
Good. Yeah, me too. Good to see you too. So today I was hoping to talk about this video that I stumbled upon by this YouTuber named Shoe on Head. Kind of a funny username she's got going on there. She has actually some really great, well-produced videos. She's really funny, but her most recent video kind of gone a little viral. I actually found it through this news YouTube podcast show that I listen to called Breaking Points. I think it's actually one of the best political just news shows out there. There's a great commentator on the left and a great commentator on the right, and they really kind of agree almost everything, really. They found this video and they've been talking about the many issues that men are struggling with today. So in this video by Shoe on Head, she spends anywhere from I think it was about 20 to 30 minutes talking about the different issues that men are struggling with, especially loneliness, difficulty finding friends, difficulties in finding partners, and how the political left and the political right are kind of trying to take advantage in some ways of capturing those demographics, maybe for their own self-interest. But at the same time, I think these issues are totally valid. My practice is primarily made up of men, most of them very successful, but a lot of them struggling with many of these issues. Even some of the successful guys don't have a ton of friends, maybe, are struggling to find a good relationship. Yeah, so I'd like to kind of touch on some of these things, and it's sort of in my wheelhouse as far as what I talk to my clients with almost on a daily basis. Maybe before I go on, I don't know, Sky, what did you think about the video?
It's a big topic, and I feel like, it's a big conversation right now on what is masculinity versus toxic masculinity versus, what's normal, what's not, how far is too far to one side or the other. Because I know one of the things she brought out is, it's either like toxic men or, you go all the way to the top where it's like, oh, you have to always share your feelings, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but it was such a wide variety of understanding and a wide variety of opinions on things. We saw her opinion versus the opinions she saw on Twitter. There's just so much to really get into with this video and kind of discuss and go through. But yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And you know what? I think masculinity in and of itself right now is, really something that's having to be re-examined, explored. And I think especially the younger generations are struggling to kind of figure out what that looks like. There's this idea out there that men have to be everything all at the same time, all at once. And I heard this 666 rule, I think from a client the other day. Okay. That was something like men have to be making six figures, have a six pack, and be 6 feet tall or something like that for a woman to find them attractive. That in and of itself eliminates quite a few people from the dating market.
Oh yeah.
Right. And,
easily.
And there's all these new terms that I'm hearing more and more: incels, red pilling. I heard the other day a black pill. Are you familiar with black pilling?
Not black pill. No.
That's, I believe, somebody who kind of looks at society and where it's at and just wants to exit, basically, just, almost no longer participate. And this is something we saw in the video. Well, I guess the definition of is the Hikikomori, which is these men. And I guess there's 1.5 million out there now that have really kind of just become recluse. I don't know if that's
I think the word she used was hermits.
Hermits is a much better word. Yes. Yeah. At least the only participation they have with society is primarily through video games or YouTube. Yeah.
Or online, interactions. I think to me, that would be hard because I'm a very social person and kind of isolating myself away. But it's so easy to do these days with, you can order food from anywhere you want on any app you want. You can order all of your groceries to your house. You can order all of your things you need to your house. Like, there's really no need to go out and about anymore if that's what you choose to do.
Yeah, it's definitely easier to stay home more than ever. And I think, after COVID, that really almost solidified, I guess, participating in society with just through your phone, right?
Yeah, made it easy. I mean, look how much Amazon Fresh grew. Look how much Amazon just grew itself. And all these like Uber Eats and they all expanded to serve food from everywhere. It's absolutely insane. And I think that maybe we're making it too easy to seclude yourself, but maybe that's what people like to do.
I think the more comfortable we can make our lives, the more prone we are to adapting to that, right? It's much easier to get fast food than to have to hunt and gather.
Yeah, for sure. I think that people who isolate themselves, though, they kind of lose that social ability and they lose that ability to be able to talk with people. In fact, one of the things that she talked about for these Hikikomori, I think you said, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's how you
I think
pronounce it.
that's,
Yeah. The
yeah.
Hikikomori was these videos that they did of Japanese women who would just stare at the camera so that they could get used to human eye contact again.
Yeah. Not only is it kind of creepy, but just sad, right? It's incredibly sad that people aren't having the same amount of contact with one another that we used to. Some of the things that I kind of jotted down wanting to talk about some of these issues that men are facing is, and I've seen this article a couple times, that men have less friends than ever before. I
Mm-hmm.
think something like 1 in 5 have no close friendships. That's probably the same demographic of the men that I work with. Is maybe their conversation with me might be the only kind of relationship they really have in their life. I believe it's harder for men to be a provider today. There's a 4 times higher suicide rate, men versus women. 70% of the homeless are men, twice as high drug and alcohol abuse rates. Men aren't going to colleges at the same rates that they used to. They're not making kind of the same amount of money that they used to. And I think at the same time, women's standards, I believe in some ways, are kind of maybe higher than ever. And so maybe there's a greater demand as well for men to. And I think the other thing that was brought up in the video is kind of some of the harm maybe that dating apps have really brought about, or at least some of the ways that it's kind of broken ways that we used to relate with one another or find one another. And I've heard a statistic out there that, something like 10 to 20% of the men on dating apps get about 80 to 90% of the attention from
Oh,
women,
geez.
leaving, the rest of that 80% of men fairly lonely and having a really hard time finding a relationship. So I think they're really startling issues, and I think they're going to have very long-term effects going forward. And I don't know that there's great answers out there in addressing some of these things. So
Yeah, I think this is an important conversation to have because there's a plus and minus to every side. How do we reincorporate these people and make them feel less lonely, especially after, let's be honest, after a post-COVID world? Because we were told to stay inside and it kind of put some trauma and some fear into us. And maybe men are lonelier, especially now than ever before, which is pretty crazy. I know I watched another video that was talking about the male friendship recession. I know Shoes on Head touched on this in her video, but I actually looked up another video on friendship recession, and it grew from, in 1990, it said 3% of men felt like they had no close male friends. 15% last year, they said, had no close friends. So it more than tripled, which is got to say something. Because personally, I can think of, I have several close male friends. Actually, I just texted a bunch of them this afternoon. There's so many different things changing right now about, what is a man, and do you need to be lonely, and how do you cope in this world, and what does the world expect of you? And it kind of just feels like this succession of stuff that could get progressively worse if we don't take care of it and change it.
what do you think it means to be a man? I don't want to have to
No,
put you on the spot here,
that's
but
a good question because it's something that we kind of all have to talk about at some point, what we think a man is. Typically, the man is going to be, the person who provides and the person who takes care of the family, and they're this like stoic individual, but I don't think that that's fair. I think a man is somebody who takes care of his family, takes care of his financial responsibilities, and somebody who is grown up enough to be able to make positive decisions, especially, and someone who knows how to take care of not just their physical health, but someone who knows how to take care of their mental health. It's so important to show those emotions and to teach the younger generation that it's okay to show those emotions. And I think that's kind of what'll help bring us more together if more and more viewed manliness that way. How about you? I want to know what's your definition of being a man?
Yeah, I've been throwing around this kind of crazy idea of branding myself as the alpha therapist, right? Sort of tongue in cheek. And in doing that, I've been asking a lot of people kind of what comes up for them when they hear the term alpha male patriarchy. And I've gotten a wide variety of answers.
I'm sure.
I've had some people feel almost instantly traumatized by the word alpha male. And actually, from some of maybe the most alpha men that I might know, because they have been traumatized by other men who have been incredibly abusive, harmful, manipulative. And so I've also gotten on the other side, that I asked this 17-year-old who at my complex in the pool, and I was just like, "Hey man, what's your definition of an alpha male?" And he said something like, someone who leads his family, is a good husband, a good father, and also emotionally mature. And then I was watching some YouTube videos from this evolutionary biologist, and his example or his definition was something sort of the same. And, he studies kind of chimpanzees. And there's actually this great show called Chimp Empire out right now that really kind of shows how the alpha male leads his tribe. And a lot of it is having empathy and understanding the rest of the community and knowing kind of what needs to be done to protect that community. So I guess that was kind of a long answer for, how I would define being a man is, I think someone that, like you said, leads, provides, protects, is also empathetic, also emotionally intelligent, is a good partner, is a good husband, a good father, a good son. Yeah, I think all of those things, a good friend as well. Yeah, I think someone who has purpose also, I think that's important, to be driven in many ways. I think without purpose, we can often end up lost. I think that's one of the biggest problems facing men today is their overall lack of purpose and or finding that purpose.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
In a post Andrew Tate world, you can't talk about manliness without really bringing him up and talking about him a little bit. And one of the things that I think I remember from the video is they talked about how he's convincing young men to go way over to the right because the right is talking to men, whereas something she brought up in the video was the left is just saying, figure it out. And and all these boys are like going to one side or the other, primarily more towards the Andrew Tate view of people. Now, he has some things that I think are valuable. He says a man, when he's born, doesn't have value. He has to find it and prove it himself. And I think that that's true. We have to prove ourselves a little bit more. But I think if we can be consistent and show ourselves, strong and tough and being able to take care of our family, while at the same time being vulnerable when we need to be vulnerable and being open when we need to be open, I think we can find a good balance there to show ourselves as a man who is emotionally mature.
Yeah, I was watching another reaction video to the shoe on head video by this guy, Asmongold, who I think is more like a Twitch streamer than anything else. And one of my other colleagues was sharing it with me. And it was interesting, his takes on a lot of the positives he saw in secluding oneself from society and sort of having empathy for those who so withdrawn. And his reaction video, I think, almost had 1 million views. So there's a lot of people watching that he's got an influential voice. And he had said something that like he couldn't think of a single time that he was vulnerable, that was beneficial for him. And not only was he kind of showing there's benefits to isolating yourself, but that there's no value in being vulnerable. And, as you were bringing it up, and sort of the whole title of our podcast is, hey man, it's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to talk about your struggles. And I've found so many different ways that I've been able to share, some of the things that I've struggled with. From the very first time that I was open with a therapist at, 12, 13 years old about the things I was struggling with and how much just, one conversation about that changed my life and helped me feel heard. to the work that I do now, where people are emotionally vulnerable, at least for, 1 hour of their week, and what that does for them to be able to open up and then get help. Right. Yeah. So I was really like discouraged to kind of hear somebody, who I believe his audience is probably primarily a lot of young men who play video games, that being emotionally vulnerable is quite a weakness more than anything. And I'm sure there's some truth to it, that men who show their emotions to women or, to their partners, that, it can then be used against them later, or that it shows them to be weak. I can imagine that if you're overly emotional every day, and if you're too emotional as well, I think that's something that has to be worked on. And I think that's something that, a lot of men who maybe don't know how to express their emotions struggle with as well. So,
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And, I wish that there was more young men talking to young men about talking about their feelings and being okay. One of the things in the video that really got me and kind of was upsetting was some of the tweets that were read
sad.
because of it looked like mostly female views. Somebody who tweeted about, there is a epidemic of male loneliness. And then there was just this heinous stream of people who were super negative about that. One of the ones that I think was really wrong was they said, what happened to men just kicking the bucket? Now they come here and try to make their loneliness and misery into some social justice issue. Well, yeah, it is. And I want to be clear, men are dying still. Even though we're starting to talk about it, the suicide rates in men is much higher than in women. And so I want to be clear when we're talking about men, and this is what the video is talking about as well. They weren't just talking about, cisgender straight men. They were talking about gay men and trans men and anybody who identifies as male. And I mean, I think it's so sad that people feel this way about men. Like, how do we change this view of things? How do we make it so much less toxic?
Yeah, I feel there's a real lack of empathy towards any sort of struggles that a man might face, because so much of the messaging is, like sort of this down with the patriarchy, or, all men are sort of oppressive. The people I work with every day, the successful ones who are influential and do have power, they're in here trying to be better partners, trying to be better business owners, better employers. Younger ones that I work with, they hardly have any power and, aren't oppressing anyone at all, and really are the opposite of an oppressor, a patriarchal oppressor. I think there's something to explore about the patriarchy in general. I know that was a big hot topic after the Barbie movie. And, I had a colleague kind of approach me and say like, well, what about the patriarchy? And, my response back was kind of like, well, what are we to do? Do we then just give up our roles as male leaders, or do we become better leaders? Can we still inhabit some of those roles, but do it with, vulnerability, emotional intelligence, empathy, care, better equality? So I think the messaging that a lot of young men face is really discouraging, and I think it comes more so from the left, and I think there's not a lot of empathy there towards especially cis white men. And I think cis white men struggle just as much as anybody else. But I think due to that messaging, it's, like in a lot of those tweets, it was very shaming and blaming to these men who are struggling, right? Pick yourself up by the bootstraps, or no, forgive my language.
Yeah.
A lot of it was just beat one out and you won't be lonely, right?
Yeah, because that'll fix everything.
Sure. And maybe it fixes something for 5 minutes. It definitely doesn't fix the root of the issues. And because of that shame and blame that I think comes more from the left, these young men who don't have a lot of good role models, don't have a lot of mentors, are then drawn, to Andrew Tate's and, Jordan Peterson. There was a clip that she showed, that said something about the nefarious characters out there speaking to young men, and she included Jordan Peterson. I've listened to so much of Jordan Peterson myself and never heard a nefarious thing out of his mouth. I think more than, his main message for a lot of men is, make your bed or clean your room. Start, instead of focusing on all of the societal issues, what can you do at the individual level to create a better life? How to find purpose. He's got 2 great books, 12 Rules for Life. They're both named 12 Rules for Life. And some of the rules are, stand up straight with your shoulders back. I'm brain farting on some of the other rules. I used to know them almost all by heart, but they're all, they're about treating people well. They're about treating yourself well and how you can overcome some of these struggles. And I think in a lot of this messaging that young men are getting, that I think a lot of it comes from the left, is it kind of that you are the problem. And there's not a lot of instruction on what to do with it.
Right. And how are they going to know without talking to somebody? I know one of the other tweets I'd like to talk about is one that says, why can't men just solve their own problems? Solve their own problems? Like, that's the problem. Why are we putting all the blame on men? Why aren't we all banding together and treating this like we're all one human race instead of these separate entities? Because the problem is we're, people are keeping this separate when really they should be issues together that we all work on together, instead of, men have to fix their own problems. No, let's fix them together. Let's figure this out together. Like, that's got to be the answer.
I think that's very well said. That this is, siloed into 2 camps that are almost against each other.
Yeah.
When, these 2 camps need each other more than ever. And I think that we both want each other, right? We want the partnership. We want the beautiful relationship. But I think it's definitely harder than ever.
And it goes both ways. I mean, men are like, oh, women are the problem, and women are like, oh, men are the problem. Like, no, the problem is the separation. The problem is keeping us apart. There's got to be something about that has to change.
What do you think about patriarchy, that idea? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I mean, we've discussed before that I'm a a God-fearing man, and I believe in God, and I'm a very faithful man, very spiritual. I think that the idea behind the patriarchy has its value. I think that as we grow as a society and grow as a people, I think the definition of that should have changed a little more. And I think some people stick to it a little too strict, because we have to allow people to control their lives and not try to, run them down and drive them into the ground. We need to be building each other up instead of breaking each other down. And I think the idea of the patriarchy should be changed in a way that it's more inclusive of everybody instead of just being men. Because there are some families out there that they don't have a male role model. All that they have, their mom is the one raising them. They don't have a dad. How are these guys supposed to figure out, what the patriarchy is? Moms are stepping up to be dads too. And vice versa. Dads are stepping up to be moms, and they've got the patriarchy, and maybe they believe it a little bit more or a little bit less. I think that's another whole big issue on, trying to fix that, but that's not something that somebody can do by themselves.
Well, I think that is the heart of this issue. I think that is single-handedly maybe the lack of good male role models, the lack of, good father is really, I think, maybe the biggest issue that's causing this. I know that I didn't have a ton of great male role models. That same 17-year-old that I asked, what was an alpha male? We later got to talking for an hour, and he had never had any sort of male role model. In fact, the conversation that we had, he said, was a once in a lifetime conversation for him to talk about his hopes and dreams and have somebody actually encourage him to go after those things, which is, it just kind of blew my mind that there's so many people out there that don't have somebody to look up to, so you get, an Andrew Tate, a Jordan Peterson, or at least, and I think this was the main point of that whole video, was at least on one side, there's people talking to them and acknowledging them and acknowledging their issues, versus some of those tweets, why don't you just cry about it? Boo-hoo, grow the fuck up.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's a group here in Washington State that they're trying to start called the Commission for Boys and Men. And I met with one of the House representatives who said that, they like the bill after we talked about it because it's like this cool commission to like help men and boys with their mental health. And she said one of the biggest drawbacks of that bill was that the primary proponent of it was a Republican. And she said, and that kind of immediately turns people off of that bill, regardless of what it is. How do we get things to change then, because that's always going to be a big battle.
Yeah, that's really disappointing. And I think that's another thing that's really tearing our society apart is we look at other people as, just this other. And depending on, whatever label that we decide to throw on them, or maybe because they have different ideas, whether, somebody's a capitalist or a socialist, once, the capitalist finds out they're a socialist, then they have nothing else they can offer, to us and vice versa, right? We just stop listening and we get so siloed into our tribes and just get in these echo chambers where we're just confirming all of our own biases, right? And so, that's actually why that news show that I watch is called Breaking Points. And, I think they're at least one of the very few that are honest kind of about, hey, this is my side, this is their side, but we want to listen to one another and we want to give you, at least a clear picture. And the beauty in that is they can then have these honest debates. Then we can actually find some real answers to, instead of, just pointing our fingers at one another and judging and blaming. One of the things I work with clients in general on is sort of getting out of judgment and blame, whether that's to somebody else or to ourselves, and actually looking at, the chain of events that are causing certain behaviors, instead of self-loathing or criticism to somebody else. It's like, well, let's actually look at, why we make these decisions in the first place, instead of just judgment around it.
Yeah, makes sense. How do we break down those barriers, though? I think because what it comes down to the barriers between sides. That's, I think, the main, the big issue is how do we connect the sides and how do we make each other listen to the other words, not the Hatfields versus the McCoys.
That's a great question. And something that I just thought of is, even in my own community, like, therapists or psychology, there is a lot of therapists out there who won't work with certain populations because of their political leanings. I get not working with populations if they're going to trigger you, but I think there's also a closed-mindedness, and there's also like this almost activist sort of side of the field as well, that, we should be sometimes imparting our beliefs onto clients and, helping them come to maybe our side. And nothing, it's something that really frustrates me as, when I see somebody, I want to, when somebody comes in here and we're working together, I want to find their, hopes, goals, their dreams, their values, what they really want to accomplish, and then help them figure out the best way towards accomplishing those, instead of just trying to impart, what I think is, valuable and important. And so I think there is, at least never before, at least in my lifetime, have I felt we've become such an individualistic society.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think maybe that is also at the heart of a lot of this is, it's all about me. It's not about you. And, we actually get more joy out of doing things for others than when we do for ourselves. I wish we could get back to more of that. We could be, a more selfless society again.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, why, instead of breaking each other down, why can't we lift each other up? No. Because the more support you have, the easier life goes. And if we all started supporting each other instead of trying to find ways to break each other down, we'd be a much happier people.
I don't know. Do you have any sense as to why we've become so individualistic? I think even, family can be looked down upon. I know, and I can understand why religion is more looked down upon today than ever before. But I think, family and religion, faith, some of these things that, would bring us together as a community or just less individualistic, we've gotten away from maybe some of these values. And I don't know that it's to our benefit.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes in the world was the invention of social media. Now, I'm a person, I enjoy social media, but some people use it for nefarious purposes, and I think we know too much about other people's lives than we did before. People can speak a lot different behind a screen than they can in person, and they do it. And I think that there's too much toxicity flying around, and I think there's too much access to this toxicity in too many different places. We all know and are involved with far too much for our brains to handle. Whereas, like, maybe before you didn't talk to your friends about their political standings, but now you know their political standings because they post about it all the time. And I think that
Yeah,
the
that's true.
invention of
That's
it has
definitely
torn us apart.
a change. Yeah. When you see the statistics of when kind of the iPhone really merged with social media and we had,
Hmm.
access to social media in our hands, the depression, especially amongst young women, plummeted. And,
Mm.
and I think comparison is often the thief of joy. And, that we're able to then just, go online and see somebody's almost performative, perfect life.
Yeah,
We're just seeing the highlights
the
of their
positive
life,
stuff.
right? Yes. Meanwhile, comparing, the worst of ourselves, when we're looking at this is is not good for our mental health. It's really
Yeah,
not.
I agree with that.
Comparison in general is not great for ourselves. Boy, when it comes to a relationship, I was listening to this divorce attorney the other day, and he was saying that Facebook and Instagram are basically are the perfect machines for creating infidelity. And for many reasons, just the easy access to people we used to know in high school or everyone in our surrounding area, and then we're often comparing our relationship to this couple's quote unquote perfect relationship that they're showing, right? Or we're then comparing our wife to the old high school crush or something like that. And so we have so many options that it's that I think we then lose focus on what's like right in front of us.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Yeah, comparison is a bitch. It's hard because we all live different lives. We all make different money, and you're like, oh man, that person just got a new car. Or that person just went on vacation. Why can't I go on vacation? Why can't I have a car? And it drives you down because people really only share the positive things in their life because that's what they want to share. Because none of us want to share when the negative things happen. And if we did more of that, we would see, okay, maybe this person's life isn't as perfect as it looks from the outside. So, I mean, it's just kind of a mess.
Well, and then when you think of an Andrew Tate, right, then you see this
Hmm.
guy who's got Bugattis and women all over and flying in private jets,
Like, I want
and
that.
yeah, yes, and he's then telling you, I have the blueprint for this. It's easy to see why people jump onto that.
For sure.
Mm.
For sure. I get it. It's appealing. But is that the healthy way? Is that how we be better? Do we all aspire for that?
Did you have a lot of good male role models growing up or mentors?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I did. I had two dads because I had my biological father and I had my stepfather. They both taught me different lessons and they both taught me different ways of being. My biological father, he was a very emotional person always and was always able to like show his emotions when he was upset or mad or angry or happy
In a,
even.
in a
And
healthy way?
sometimes not in healthy ways, but he's much better now. And then my stepdad, he was always I would definitely consider him a manly man. He was very stoic. He laughed a lot. He didn't cry a lot, but he never judged us for showing our emotions. Growing up, I was a very emotional person, and he was always there for me when I needed him, and it was great. I loved having that, and I loved his support. And I mean, now we've got a great friendship. I love my stepdad.
Nice. Yeah.
He's just dad also. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think I had some, and plus I had my cousin Sean was a good male role model to me, who I've talked about. And I think I had several good male role models, I believe, growing up. So that's good.
Yeah. I think that was, something that really was missing from my life that then led me to, not making some of the best decisions at times. I had a father who, was the maybe epitome of a macho man and just exuded that machismo. I mean, he was
It's a
like
great word.
6'4". He was, huge chest, lots of anger. He was a, general contractor. So, he could build anything with his hands. But I think the first time he told me he loved me was like when I was like 17 or 18. And, that was probably the first time I got a hug as well.
Oh, wow.
And that being said, that made me want to do everything differently, and, I saw, if that's what a man is, boy, I want to do things a little different. And, and so I went, sort of in the complete opposite direction, and, wanted to have as many friends as I could. And,
Mm-hmm.
then, got into nightlife, and, and now, I talk about feelings all day, which is completely different from the man, that raised me. And so, so I didn't have, so I had him, I guess, as, my main father figure, or main male in my life. I had an uncle who was a psychologist, and he was great at listening, and, and the inspiration, for the reason I do what I do today. But outside of that, there weren't, I didn't have a lot of good people, I think, to look up to, and, and really guide me. So
What would you go back and tell your maybe, let's go with 15-year-old self? What would you tell yourself to help you along in your journey? Like, if you had 10 words to say to him or whatever.
that's a good question.
I would tell.
Like I went to an all boys Catholic school, right?
Okay.
And so again, most of the teachers, most of the leaders there, a lot of them were priests. And so that was also something I wasn't, wanting to go after. And so therefore I didn't, I did my best to not listen to them as well. I don't know. I guess it might be, to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that there are still kind of some lessons to be learned, maybe from some of these people we don't totally agree with. From my dad, I wish I would have, watched his handyman skills or his carpentry skills better, so that I didn't have to learn everything, on my own now. But at the same time, he was a hard guy to be around at times, and you often got yelled at, or you often got really criticized. And so, I don't know. I don't know what I would
Yeah, I know
have.
it's
what
a
I
big
could
question.
have sought out. Yeah. Maybe more therapists.
Yeah. I'd probably tell myself therapy's okay. It's gonna feel uncomfortable, but just lean into it. And maybe I would have, healed sooner. Maybe not. Maybe I needed to be through the lessons that I've been through.
No.
I think if that version of me could see this version of me, I think I might annoy myself, because I'd be an annoying adult to myself then.
The other thing I was just thinking about is the idea of a man, when thinking about my father, and that idea of, machismo and being macho and tough love was probably the messaging of that day, right? That, it was almost, be a toxic male,
Yeah.
be mean, be hard, be incredibly stoic. Now it's almost swung, the complete opposite direction. And I think that's again, maybe at the heart of this issue is how do men, and, where is that balance of, being able to talk about your emotions, your struggles, actually reaching out for help, while also, being a leader of your family, leader in your community, leader at your job. So being strong, both physically and mentally. So it's there's a lot to do there, and that takes a lot of work to get good at all of those different things. And if we don't have, great role models, showing us what that really looks like, it's an even more difficult hill to climb.
For sure. I agree with that. If we can build each other up, be a positive role model for people, open communication, maybe eventually it'll catch on and these things will change.
Well, hopefully we're doing our part here.
Yeah,
or at least
that's kind of what I'm hoping,
yeah.
Right? That's the idea. Hey man, it's okay. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to add to that topic. I think we've heard all of my opinions of everything, my thoughts on everything. How about you, Ryan?
I'm going down I'm looking at my notes here, and I think we I would encourage people to watch the video. Again, her name is Shoe on Head, and it really is a great video depicting kind of how politically men's issues are being looked at today.
We'll put a link to it on our website.
Yeah, that'd be great. And let us know what you think. Let us know what you think you're struggling with. Oh, what the last thing I'll touch on. Mm-hmm. The most heartbreaking thing around this video was the comment section on the video. And I did you see, I don't know if you looked into
I actually didn't go into the comment section, no.
There were quite a few, where I'm paraphrasing here. I just want, I think the most popular one was, mm-hmm. I just want to find somebody that cares about me that's not my mom. And it was things like that like,
it's heartbreaking.
I just wish somebody would, recognize me, acknowledge me.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's that.
Like I said, we need to build each other up instead of break each other down.
Yep.
Get rid of the separations between people.
Yeah, listen to one another. Have some empathy. Care. Yeah. Give a shit.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't matter what side they are politically. You can care about somebody.
Yeah, for sure.
I've
got friends of all kinds of backgrounds and varieties and mm-hmm. Beliefs.
Mm-hmm. I used to see two clients who were friends, and I'd often see them back to back. Like okay. One at 4, one at 5. And I saw them kind of during the last election, and even though they were great friends, they couldn't talk about their politics, and so they'd talk to me about their politics often, and it was actually a lot of fun because I got to see these two people who bonded on so many different things, but then we're so far apart in their beliefs politically, mm-hmm. and they both made sense, and yet I understood why this guy identified with his side, and I understood why this guy identified with their side. And that's where I am kind of politically, is I can understand why people believe this is the way society should be ran or built or gone about, and I can also understand why people believe this is the way, and we all have the best intentions. I feel like when we're coming, I hope, I don't know about the actual politicians having the best intentions for us, but that's another podcast episode. So,
yeah, I think something people forget is it's okay to have an opinion. And you don't necessarily have to agree with everyone's opinion.
Mm-hmm. Or just listen to it, and acknowledge that they're probably coming from, an honest, authentic place.
We all have different understandings of things, different beliefs and things, and that's okay. That's what makes us people, individual people, by being together like that.
Yeah, and I know we're going long. This has been the last thing I say. When I've been working with a lot of couples lately, and one of the things, I try to get them to help better understand one another is I give this example that I'm colorblind, and mm-hmm. and literally I'm colorblind, and so I actually see the world very differently from most people, right? Like what I'm looking at and that is my truth. You cannot tell me this thing is, I don't know, red when to me it's green, but I'll believe you because I know I'm the one who's got the different cones and rods. And so it's just those little cones and rods, these tiny little things. I think they're somewhere in the back of the head that make me see the world drastically different. Now, if you take that and, add hormones, add upbringing, add religion, add parents, anatomy, it's a miracle, that like almost two people can even get along. And so knowing that we all have such different points of views, starting there, is a good way to trying to better understand one another.
Yeah, I agree. So, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Well, I think we've reached the end of this episode, guys. If you have anything else to add, please email us, reach out to us on social media. We're on all social media at Hey Man It's Okay. Our website, heymanitsokay.com. We have all of our episodes, links to different charities you can donate to, including helping support this podcast. But I guess until next time, from me, Sky, it's okay to not be okay. And I'm looking forward to talking with you on the next episode.
Love you guys.
Thanks.
Peace.